Here we're back in the Perfect Score, ready to build the heat reaction system together. Before getting started, let me show you, there is no heat reaction in place. Let's get some fun with this. The first thing we want to do is creating an enumeration which we hold the values forwards, backwards, right and left. So let's start the simulation. Go to your character folder, right click anywhere, go to new asset, blueprints, enumeration. Call it whatever you want to call it. I call it heat reaction, heat type, sorry. Let's open it up and enter four more values. Forwards, backwards, right, and left. We will actually add one more value in case we want to have an extra value for just keeping it empty. Next, we want to create animation montages for our heat reactions. Animation montages are fairly easy to create. Just let's stop the simulation and go to the heat reaction animations you downloaded or you already have. Right click to one of them, go to create any montage, and the animation montage is automatically created for you. Just give it a name. Save, and I'll place it in animation montage in the folder. Now let's open it up, and as you can see here, there is something saying default group, default slot. If we don't give it a different slot, the animation montage is not going to play. The way to do that is by going to the animation blueprint, right click and bring up slot, default slot. If you click on it here in the settings, you can click here and create a new one. We will call this body. Now that it's created, if you close this up, you can see that you can select it in here. And all you have to do is plug this in and plug this one in here. Let's compile. And now that we go back to the animation montage, we can set it to that. If you don't do this, your animation montage is not going to play. The process for creating an animation montage is always the same for any animation. Therefore, I won't go over all the heat reactions. Just do the same for the left, right, and backwards. Following, we're going to create two channels. An object channel, and we're going to call it mesh, and a trace channel. We're going to call it characters. I like to have dedicated channels for the objects and for the traces when I create a system. It's not strictly necessary, but when you create multiple systems in your game, you avoid any conflict between them. And that's the reason why I want to create these two here, right now. Let's click on Edit, Project Settings. Let's go under Engine, Collision, and here you can say New Object Channel. We will give it the name of Mesh, and we will say Block, Accept, and then New Trace Channel, and we will call it, we say Characters, and leave it to Block, Accept. Let's close this, and save. The next thing we want to do is creating the Capsule collider that we will place on the limbs of our main character, in this case my support character. So let's go over to my character, which is the support character in this case, your case, whatever character you're using. Let's open it. Let's go to the viewport, and you will click on a component and type Capsule collision. Let's call it left punch and parent it to the mesh. Compile, and here it is. It's way too big. We want it to be something like for radius and for height, more or less like this. Now we also want it to snap to a specific bone because we want it to be on her end, since the animation I'm using in this case is going to be the jab, the left punch. So let's go to the construction script, right click and type attach to component. We're going to select left punch. We want to attach it to our mesh, and we want it to snap to the location as the scale rule should be snapped to, and the rotation should be relative. Now we need the socket name, so we will get that by going to our animation blueprint of our character, and then we can go to skeleton. In here you have all the list of the bones you will need. Since we want to snap it to this hand, the left hand, I'm going to go and grab the middle finger of the left hand, copy selected bone names so that we don't make typos, and then let's just copy it and paste it. Let's compile, go to the viewport, and as you can see, it's snapped to the hand. Now that we created the collider, the next thing we have to do is setting the collision preset to be the right ones, which is really important. If you don't get this part right, there's not going to be collision between this collider and the mesh. So let's go first into the mesh of the support character and the police character and set it to be custom, to be a mesh, collision enable current physics, and we don't want to simulate basically hits. Then we will set the visibility to ignore. We want to overlap with the camera and we want to block the character's trace response. The rest can more or less be the same. We don't need this, and we need to overlap with other meshes probably, and we will need the handholds like this. So this is the settings we want to get. Let's compile and go to our police character blueprint. Let's go to the viewport and let's do the same thing for our police character. Let's set these to be custom, collision enabled, again mesh, and then let's ignore visibility, overlap the camera, block the characters. We want to block these two, pawn, and we want to not destructible, and we want to basically overlap with the mesh. Let's compile, and now lastly we have to set the left punch to the right settings. So let's go to custom. We want to have no collision at the moment, and I'll explain you why. I will explain you why later. Then we will set it to be physics body, and we basically ignore everything. We want to overlap with the pawn because that's what the capture component is set to. We want to overlap with the pawn, and we want to block the mesh and leave the handles like that. Let's compile, and we're all set. Okay, the next thing we have to do is very important. Everything I'll show you is very important, but this part is particularly important. If you don't get this right, the system is not going to work at all. We want this vector, the right vector. And for those of you who don't know, basically I'm just referring, when I say vectors, I'm referring to the axis. As you can see, there are these three axes, X, Z, and Y. And this is basically the right vector, this is the up vector, and this is the forwards vector. So that's what I'm referring to when I said vector. So we want the right vector to face forwards when she's punching. And the only way you could try to get this by trying many times to rotate it to the right position, you know, like so, more or less, and try to get it right. But actually it's very hard. So instead of trying to position it and then run it, position and then run it and see how the character reacts, I'm going to show you how to get it right a bit faster. What you have to do is go into your tick function, which is going to be ignore just this word code, and create something like this. So what we're doing is getting the specific collider we're trying to set the rotation of, then get the world location, the world rotation, and get the right vector. The reason why I'm choosing the right vector is that the mesh also uses the right vector for the forwards, basically position. You could have used any other vector if you wanted, but just for consistency, I'm using the right vector. So let's go back to the node here. And what you want to do is join a line. You want to see what this vector looks like, where it's facing basically where you're performing a punch. That's the reason why I'm making 100 units long, and then I'm basically drawing a debug line. So let's connect it to our tick function. In your case, if you don't have anything here, you will just to get the event tick. So you just type event tick. It's gonna come up, and then you connect this pin to this. Then let's compile, and let's check out what this looks like. As you can see, it's not right facing where we want it to face. When we punch, we want this line to be drawn forwards, to basically go from here to here, and that's not what's happening right now. As you can see, it's much easier in this way rather than try to basically set it from here by trying and going back and forth. So probably something like this work. Let's try it again. Almost, but not yet. Let's try it once more. As you can see, now we get the result we want. It's facing forwards. If you look at her fist, the fist is basically facing here, and that's the vector you want to use. So if we punch now, the last lines drawn at the basically middle of the punch animation look forwards. And that's what you want to obtain. You can do the same thing for any other capsule collider that you use on the lips in order to set the rotation to the right rotation. We will need this in a bit, and you'll see why. Now that we created our first capsule collider, it's placed on the limb. It's in the right position and in the right rotation, depending obviously on the animation. If you have a different animation, probably the rotation will be different. But as you've seen, the process is basically always the same for each limb. So if you will place multiple colliders, you'll have to do what I've just done more times. That's all. Let's move on and go to our support character blueprint. And what we will do next is first unplug this. We don't need it anymore. Go to our event graph, and we're going to grab the on component begin and then the overlap from the punch collider 1 and 2. Place it in here, and out of the two we're going basically to do the same. So out of here we're going to say cast to police char. Again, this is going to be basically your enemy. Connect the two, and we want to connect this to the other actor and this to the other actor. Following, we will create a couple of macros. The reason why I'm using macros is that, first of all, I don't need to call this basically chunk of code from outside this blueprint. The second one is that macros allow you to basically use delays inside, and we will use some delay function. So let's click twice here, the first time, and call it the mage opponent, and the second time and call it reset the mage system. Sorry, just misspelled. System. Let's go to our the mage opponent macro, and we will need basically 1, 2, 3, and 4 inputs. The first one is going to be an execution pin. The second one is going to be a reference to the police char, in your case the enemy. The third one is going to be a reference to a capsule collision, and the last one to a primitive component. Let's give it the name of execution, enemy, collider, and other. Let's compile and go over to our reset damage, in which we will also need 1, 2, and in this case just 3 pins. The first one is the execution, and the input is going to be execution. The second one is going to be a reference to our police chart, again your enemy, you call it enemy. And the third one is going to be a reference to the primitive component, again other. Let's compile and save this. Next, we'll go back to the event graph and we'll use the damage opponent here and the reset damage system here. Let's connect execution with execution, police char with enemy. Then we will grab, in this case, the collider we're using is the left punch. This one is the collider. And then the other component with other. Let's go over here and basically do the same thing. Enemy with police char, another component with other. Let's compile. And go over to our damage opponent. What we have to do here is actually a lot. And I'm going to try to explain it while I'm doing this. So the first thing we want to do is creating few variables that we will use inside this macro. Let's click on variable, and the first variable is going to be opponent, and we will set it to be a reference to our police char. Then the next one is going to be, let's grab the capsule component of our enemy and promote it to the variable. It's going to be a reference basically to the capsule component of our enemy, and we will call it, oh sorry, I meant to say, let's get the mesh of our enemy and promote this to a variable, and it's going to be called mesh opponent. So we will have to set the opponent to be our enemy and the mesh to be the mesh of our enemy. Let's get some space in here. And the next thing we want to do is branching, and we want the rest of this code to run only in case the other component coming from here is equal to the capsule collider of our enemy. So what we will do is saying here capsule component, and we will compare this, so we'll say equal to other. If it is equal, then we want to run the rest of this code, otherwise we don't want to. The next thing we're going to do is creating another variable. It's going to be a boolean, and we could call it check mesh hit. Set it to be boolean, and we want first it to set it to true. Now, from here we're going to use a custom while loop that we're going to create together. It's basically a macro. It's a while loop that will allow you to have some delay. The reason why we're using a while loop is that basically what we're trying to do is, as soon as the left punch enters the capsule component of our enemy, we want to start to check if a hit occurs, and we will do that by using a capsule trace by channel. So as soon as the left punch collider enters the capsule component, we don't just want to check the whole time if we're hitting something. We want just to check as soon as he enters this component. As soon as he enters it, then we would to start to check if we're hitting the mesh. And we do that by using a trace by channel. Now, if we use a normal while loop, the normal while loop is going to iterate so fast that it's going to crush everything. So what we can do is using a custom while loop that will accommodate a small delay. It's going to allow basically the system to do not crash. Let's go ahead and create quickly our custom while loop. Let's click on macro, while loop with delay, and is going to accept basically an execution pin called execution. Then it's going to get another parameter, a delay, oops, misspelled it, sorry, and then a boolean. It's going to get a condition. The outputs are going to be basically 2, and they're going to be 2 executions. One is the loop body. So as you can see, the structure is exactly the same of a while loop. The only thing that differs from a while loop is the delay. And the second one is going to be completed. Now what we want to do here is branching, obviously using this condition, and then use a sequence. The first pin of the sequence is going to go to the loop body, and the second one is going to call a delay. The duration of the delay is going to be our delay parameter, and then once completed, it's going to go back here, check again the condition, and then it's going, if it's false, it's going to complete. That's what it looks like. So let's compile and go back to our event graph. From here, I actually meant to go to the major opponent, and we will grab our while loop with delay. Gonna have a very short delay, something like this. I want to check very often. I want this heat reaction to be very precise. And then we're going to run this loop as long as check mesh heat is true. So all we have to do to break out of the while loop is setting this variable to false. Next, as I was telling you, we're going to use the capsule trace by channel. So as soon as we enter the capsule, we start to use a trace. And we're going to set it to characters. Trace complex, no, InnoSF, yes. Now we need to create a vector that we will use for this capsule trace by channel. And here we will use our collider. So we want to basically capture trace by channel out of our collider. We get the word location. We get the word rotation. Then we want to use the right vector. And here it is what I was telling you before. We will use the right vector, and that's why we position the right vector to look forwards. Then we will multiply this by a float. It's going to be a very small number. We want this trace to be short, because we want the hit point to occur only when this left punch collider is very, very close to the mesh. Then we're going to basically add these two together. And we want to say this is the end of our vector, and this is the start, sorry, I meant of our trace. Out of here, we're going to break the hit, and we only want to say that an hit occurs if we hit actually the mesh, and that's where we're going to use this variable again we got before, mesh opponent. Drag it out here, get, and we want to compare it with hit component. Equal, we want to check if it's equal to basically the mesh opponent. If it is, then we will say that we don't want to check anymore. Oh, sorry, we don't want to check anymore for the mesh hit, because we hit the mesh. On the other hand, we want to keep looping. After this, we will have to call basically the event for the point damage that is going to run in the police karate blueprint. Let's compile. And now, as you may remember, we set this collider to no collision. So at the moment, this is not going to work. The reason for that is that I don't want the collider to check continuously for collisions if we are not attacking. It wouldn't just make sense. The way we can enable it and disable it is by using notifies. So if we go to our support character animation blueprint and we look for the animation montage that I'm using for the punch, what we can do, as you can see, there are already other notifies, but they do not interest us at the moment. We can place at the right moment notify that enables. So I'd say roughly around here we can enable it, or over here, and disable it after that. So we can right click, go to add notify. You obviously won't have all this. You go on new notify and you can say enable left punch. Then let's go forwards, and once the punch occurred, we don't want to check anymore for collisions, so we say disable left punch. Now let's save this, go to our graph, we want to go to the event graph, and here there is already a section ahead dedicated to this. So what we do is right click and simply say enable left, and you can see punch here, and disable left punch. Then after this we will grab an instance of our support character. I already got a variable already here, and out of this we will say left punch, get left punch, here it is, and then we will say enable collision, set collision enabled, I meant. So with this, anytime this notify is run, we can enable and disable basically the collision, which is better than having it checking the whole time. So when we enable it, we want to say that we want to query in physics, so the collision is completely enabled. Otherwise, there is no collision. Let's compile.